Can you pour from an empty cup? Can you pour from a cup that you can't even sip out of? How can you grab your tea and relax when there's nothing in it? I believe it's only possible to give to others what you have for yourself, and that is why taking care of your mental well-being isn't just important, it's essential. But what happens if you hate yourself or your circumstances? What then? Here is what I've learned. The hardest times in your life often lead to the most powerful transformations. Struggles don't just break you, they shape you. And sometimes to rebuild, you have to fall apart first. If you need proof, if you need hope, grab your tea and relax. Come join me on a journey of hope, growth, and resilience. In my previous video, I shared some deeply personal moments of my childhood, from financial instability, growing up in a deprived neighbourhood of East London, as well as facing online and in-person bullying. This video is a continuation of that story, focusing on the challenges I faced as an adult, how they shaped me, and eventually how I turned things around. Let's dissect my name, Omama Tavale, into half, rearrange the letters, and take a trip down trauma lane. When I started university, I felt unstoppable. I was that girl. I had all the roles, the ambitions. I was course representative, to be honest, for all of the 6 years at medical school. I represented an educational society where I regularly did shout-outs in the lecture theatre. My grades were pretty good. I took on sport like badminton and rowing. I even set up my own society, Traditional Art Society, which is ironic considering I now champion photography, digital art, as well as making YouTube videos. For a whole year, I was also preclinical faculty representative, which meant that I chaired meetings between staff, as well as a couple representatives from different year groups. Cardiovascular research was also something I pursued during my holidays, and I had presented my original work internationally. I'm listing these out not because this video is a CV, but more as a recipe list for burnout. On paper, it looked impressive, but underneath this, I was crushed by the weight of all of the things I was trying to juggle. I wasn't prioritizing my health. I wasn't prioritizing spending time with the people who actually mattered. I wasn't even checking in with myself. We all get 24 hours in a day, and it's about how you spend it that counts. All these activities had an opportunity cost. The cost was my physical and my mental well-being. By third year, anxiety hit me like a ton of bricks. The person who once stood in front of hundreds of people struggled to speak even in front of 10. Social settings felt unbearable. My mind would get tangled and my confidence shattered. I couldn't cope with the society I had set up. I began to feel debilitated at the thought of chairing a meeting or sitting in board meetings. I stopped singing and performing. I avoided anything that drew attention to me. And it's so sad to think, because I was so focused on my achievements and helping others that I just forgot completely to take care of myself. I turned to things that I am not proud of to cope, and those were quick fixes, and it only deepened the mess. For the first time in my life, I admitted I couldn't do it alone. My supervisor was kind enough to contact quite a few people that got me therapy under the NHS. And that was my first step towards healing, admitting that I needed help. Now, therapy wasn't some magical cure, but it gave me the space to untangle my thoughts, to hear myself think and arrive at my own conclusions in a safe setting. And in those sessions, I was allowed to wander freely in my own mind, and I reconnected with what I had forgotten, who I really was. The creative, caring, bright soul my loved ones knew me to be. That's who I was, not the burnt out version of me trying to please all the people around me, people who didn't even care about me. I rediscovered my hobbies. I started creating time for joy again. And perhaps more importantly, I began to be more selective about who I allowed access to my life. During university, I also traveled a lot, and here's my take on it, which might be a bit controversial. Traveling is a form of escapism. It's an escape from the life that you don't love, but eventually you're going to need to come back to this life, right? You're going to need to come back home. So instead, I decided to build a life that I don't need to run away from anymore. I don't need to escape from it. I built my own sanctuary. I learned that home isn't just a place, it's where you water your plants. It's where you nurture your soul. It's where you grow with your plants. And growth isn't always pretty. Just before I graduated medical school, I failed an exam, and yes, it was devastating. But looking back, failing that exam was probably one of the best things that happened to me. It taught me resilience. Failing isn't the end. The real test is how you rebuild. And sometimes that rebuilding makes you stronger than you ever thought possible. Becoming a doctor was a dream I had worked towards for many years. Many of you remember my study series, and I still receive messages from people who found those videos helpful during their own tough times. It's heartwarming to hear your stories of growth and successes. Please continue to share them. I'd love to see how you've grown. But stepping into the role of a doctor was a reality check. I was eager to apply everything I had learned over the 6 years of medical school, but the challenges came fast. In my first job, the pressures were intense. I was told by a senior that I wasn't allowed to go on break until all of the jobs were done on the ward. Real story. On my first job, I was told that I wasn't even allowed to eat until 3 p.m, even though I was at work since 7:30 in the morning. And during this, I might have learnt to inhale a burger in 5 minutes. With the state of that job, I was oftentimes told by the rota person to stay for a 12.5-hour shift instead of the 8 hours I should have been there. So that with my 3 hours commute, you can imagine I'm out of the house for 15 hours a day. So at what point am I finding time to eat, sleep, or even have time with myself? At what point am I having time to process things that have happened at work? So burnout wasn't a distant concept, it hit me like a wave within weeks. And the hardest part wasn't even the hours, it was the environment. And having been somebody that wouldn't regularly cry on ward, there was one day where I cried 8 times before lunchtime, and that was the point I realized my breaking point. And so later that day I touched base with somebody who changed my perspective on medicine. They had moved me to a whole different ward in the same department though. There, breaks were not a luxury, they were a necessity. We went for coffee together, we had lunch together, we always finished on time, and I never had to come in extra early in order to prepare anything before ward round. Although it was the same job, I had a completely different experience, and that saved my career. Without this particular doctor's guidance, I don't think I would be practicing in medicine, because at the time I went to her, I said to her, and these were the words I said, "Doctor," her name, "if this is medicine, I don't want it." And she told me to come back the next day after boardroom, and I said, "Doctor," name, "what part of I'm not coming back to this ward is unclear to you?" It was a bit of a sassy response, but really and truly, I was so done with medicine at that point. And it's funny because around that time, people in real life would come up to me and say things like, "Dr. Tavali, you look quite sad in your videos lately, are you okay?" And I was like, "Sad? Me? No, it's just I'm showing the realities of being the doctor." I was just really trying to survive. I was compartmentalizing everything just to stay functional. It was only when I took time off after foundation training that I started addressing what had happened: burnout, workplace bullying, and the toll it took on my mental health. Our recovery wasn't linear. I was working like once or twice every 2 weeks, and I was living with my parents, eating food at home. I focused on rebuilding myself physically and mentally, and I'm so grateful for that time. It really taught me you cannot pour from an empty cup. In the new year, I hope to share my experiences on my recovery. While I'm not a therapist, I hope that my story provides some inspiration and perhaps gives some practical tools in order to survive a difficult period. Resilience isn't about ignoring pain. It's about finding ways to rise once you've fallen. It's about becoming stronger and more compassionate to yourself and therefore to others. So grab your tea and let's start this conversation. In medicine, we're taught to be strong, to stay professional, and to keep going. But what people don't tell you is you really can't pour from an empty cup. I mean, how can you grab your tea and relax when there's nothing in it? You can't truly care for other people unless you have taken care of yourself first and foremost. You can only have true compassion for other people once you've had that compassion for yourself. You can only truly ease the suffering of those around you once you have eased your own suffering. Otherwise, you'll just resent the people along the way who you have helped. Looking back, every challenge, every failure taught me resilience. And resilience isn't about never failing. It's about rising after you've had a fall. It's about protecting your well-being, not just your success. And it's about being vulnerable enough and honest enough with yourself to know this and recognize this. So tell me, how do you take care of your mental well-being? Let's create a space where we prioritize well-being together. Because no matter where you are, doesn't matter how tough things get, you can turn it around. If this video resonated with you, make sure you like and subscribe and come join me for more content focused on growth. I can't wait to grow with you. Mwah.